So you want a ZH2. I see you're one of those kinds of squids. The kind of squid who sees the speed limit sign and thinks, I'm good. You feel the need for speed so deeply in your soul that you probably know the whole 10-second speech that Vin Diesel gives in the first Fast and Furious movie. You like speed so much that you decided you need to get a naked bike so that you can really feel the wind through your hair as you're blasting through a school zone at 90 miles per hour, dodging children and minivans. Or maybe you're an older guy who just needs a motorcycle to make them feel young again because, let's face it, not a whole lot of millennials are buying hypernaked. Something about impending financial doom and crippling student loan debt from a degree that helped them get a shift lead job at Starbucks. But there we go again, talking about the economy. Did you know I have an economics degree? I feel like I haven't mentioned it in a minute, and we've got so many fresh-faced squids here on the channel. Anyways, the H2 line of motorcycles has a long history of terrifyingly fast bikes, and it's one of the only factory forced induction motorcycles on the market today, so it's pretty darn unique. And if that wasn't enough, we've got one as a giveaway motorcycle. So we figured it was time to break it all down for you so you can get your learn on about this absolute unit of a naked bike, one that'll put some real hair on your chest. Speaking of which, have you heard about the new Lawnmower 4.0 from Manscaped? They managed to improve on perfection by adding a new aerodynamic look, longer battery, and improved torque so you can trim a literal bush with this thing. And I'm not talking about that Gandalf the Grey looking pube forest, I'm talking an actual bush. Please note, Manscaped has not approved the prior statement and does not recommend using Lawnmower 4.0 for yard work. Anyway, the Lawnmower 4.0 has a 90-minute battery life, so you don't need to stop halfway through a proper pube job, and you'll still have some juice left over to shave your pits, your chest, your dome, and whatever else hair you can trim with the lawnmower. Plus, they have razor guards, so you can now select the length you want to trim to, just in case you don't want that squeaky clean feeling. It's time to activate your inner Beamer boy and trade in last year's model Busted 3.0 for the new hotness, my dude. Click the link down below and get yours for 20% off, no codes or anything, just click the link and pick it up. Thanks to Manscaped for supporting the video. Now let's talk about the ZH2. No discussion of the ZH2 would be complete without a little trip down memory lane, starting in 1969 with the Kawasaki H1 Mach 3. Back in the 60s, people were sick and tired of bikes that made the same old 40 to 50 horsepower. No, that wasn't good enough anymore. We needed something bigger and better. So what did Kawasaki do? They made a smaller motorcycle. Confused? Well, I forgot to mention it was a two-stroke. Yep, the H1 Mach 3 was a 498cc three-cylinder two-stroke putting down 60 horsepower and 42 foot-pounds of torque, and it could clear a standing quarter mile in 12.4 seconds in 1969. This thing was fast. It helped that it only weighed 414 pounds wet, which is basically what you'd expect from a performance-oriented bike nowadays. So 60 years ago, it was a real featherweight. Back in the day, reviewers said that the bike's gearbox was wonky, it handled funny, and the brakes were questionable at best, which is industry speak for it's a freaking death trap. It was the first of the Kawasaki triples to really earn a reputation for killing its riders, but 60 horsepower still wasn't enough. Before we move on though, you've got to take a listen to this bike. If there's one thing the H bikes are known for, it's their crazy exhaust. Take a listen. So with people wanting more power, as they often do, Kawi bored out the engine from 498cc's to 748cc's. Still using the two-stroke triple, and the new engine put down 74 horse and 57 foot-pounds. Unfortunately, all that extra muscle came at the expense of weight, with the bike now clocking in at 452 pounds dry. So call it 480 ready to ride, maybe a little bit less. It still managed to shave a half second off the quarter-mile time though, down from 12.4 to 12 flat, and that's no mean feat. The H2 Mach 4 first dropped in 1972, and Kawi spent the next 3 years tinkering around with the engine, but they never managed to beat the first model year. In 73, they changed the jetting, added a second brake disc because stopping the bike was occasionally useful, and added a chain oiler. The extra weight and jetting slowed the bike down a bit in order for it to behave like a normal motorcycle, and they kept making more civilized tweaks to the bike, but there's only so much that you could do. It was at its heart a savage animal that just wanted to rip your arms off. At the time, it was the fastest production motorcycle in the world, and while it was unbelievably dangerous to ride, thanks to motorcycle technologies that's older than dinosaurs, it had and still has an extremely loyal cult following. Let's take a listen. The H2 Mach 4 was replaced by the Z750 in 1975, with that being the new quote-unquote performance motorcycle, though they had completely changed everything about the bike. It was a 746cc 4-stroke inline-4, making only 55 horsepower and 44 foot-pounds of torque. It was basically just another UJM, but that was the way the industry was going at the time. Kawi stuck by the Z750, going through the Z1900, the Z650, the Z800, and the Z1000, and the Z900, all while the H2 nameplate gathered dust on a shelf somewhere until 2015, nearly 40 years later. In 2015, Kawasaki unveiled their brand new Ninja H2, and basically all the two-wheeled speed demons out there collectively creamed their jeans. It was a street-legal production sport bike that literally anyone could go out and buy, that made 200 horsepower, had a supercharger, and a factory warranty. So what's it got under the hood? Well, you've got a 998cc inline-4, supercharged of course, and a shockingly low 8.5 to 1 compression ratio for all that sweet, sweet boost. Despite that, you have an even 200 horsepower at 11,000 RPM and 98.5 foot-pounds of torque right out of the box. The H2 was such a smash hit with fast boys out there that they spent a ton of time getting to really know the bike and its systems, and within the first year of the bike coming out, people had cracked the ECU and had them making 238 at the wheel already. People have been able to make even more power out of these bikes, including Kawasaki. They released the H2R, which was a track-only variant of the H2, and the bike from the factories putting down 326 horsepower, which was over 50% more power than the fastest leader bikes out there, even today. Yeah, you think your Panigale V4 is quick, well, it doesn't have anything for the H2R. The only problem is that pretty much only a MotoGP rider can handle a bike making that much power, but who cares? You didn't spend $55,000 on a track-only motorcycle and expect to compete with it. You just roll it out of your toy hauler, run a few parade laps at pace, and then pit in, and then do massive highway pulls to just flex on all your buddies. Let's listen to the H2R at full song. Kawi didn't just make bikes for sport bike fast boys though, they also made the H2SX, which was a dad bike sport touring version, and the ZH2, which is why you're here. You want some numbers on the ZH2? Of course you do, who wouldn't? The ZH2 has the same 998cc inline-4 with the supercharger, and it's putting down a mere 197 horsepower and 98 foot-pounds of torque, but it only costs $17,000, which is absolutely crazy. Now I know what you're thinking, but the ZH2 only makes 197 horsepower, Yammie. It's not making 200 horsepower, Yammie. Why should I get the ZH2 and not the H2, Yammie? I need the big bike to show my dad that I'm a big boy. You really don't. You're not gonna notice that difference, and if you don't want people questioning your masculinity over a measly 3 horsepower, just get a full system, a tune, and a sprint filter. It's that easy. It's way more comfortable, and it still absolutely rips. Now, it's worth saying that the ZH2 has a completely different ECU setup that people haven't cracked yet. I'm not sure why it's so hard. I'm not an engineer, but seeing as how Kawasaki just loves to reuse parts across the whole range of motorcycles, I'd have guessed that it would have been just as easy to crack, but it's not. So what does that mean? Well, you can't get crazy rear wheel horsepower numbers. Don't get me wrong, with over 200, a power commander is great, but if you need to absolutely get a dyno chart showing 250 at the wheel, you might want to get yourself a Turbo Busa instead. But let's get a sound check of our own ZH2 that we have in the shop real quick. But the real question is what is the ZH2 like to ride? Well, if you guys have seen our videos, you know that it feels like your hair, dick, and balls have suddenly caught on fire. We've got a ton of videos talking about the ZH2, but if I had to put it into one word, bonkers seems the most fitting. If you even look at the throttle in the ZH2, it power wheelies. Also, there's nothing quite like the feeling of rolling off the throttle and hearing a supercharger flutter right near your nutsack. A lot of credit needs to go to the electronics package too. It doesn't slam down wheelies like some anti-wheelie system do. The quick shifter is one of the crispest feeling that I've ever felt, and it's not so complicated that you get lost in menus within menus to the point where your motorcycle starts to look more like an Excel spreadsheet than a fun toy. Now, let's compare the ZH2 to its competition. We've got a whole video comparing it to a Super Duke and a Tuono, so go watch those comparisons, but let's dive into the other Japanese hyper naked, the MT-10. What people don't seem to realize about the MT10 is that from the frame down, it's just an R1. The frame is the same, the suspension's about the same, and the engine, while it's been detuned slightly, is still the same 998cc crossplane inline 4. It's putting down 160 horsepower, which is still a lot of power for a street bike, but the spec sheet warriors are always going to choose the ZH2. Personally, I think the MT10 sounds better with the pipe, but out of the box, the ZH2 takes the cake. It's just way more fun and interesting to ride. Around a corner, though, the MT10 is simply sublime thanks to that R1 derived frame and suspension, but the ZH2 is no slouch. If you're planning on taking the Z to a track, you definitely want to get some taller foot pegs though. Looks wise, both these bikes are something of an acquired taste, but hey, you don't see the bike while you're riding it. The main differentiator is that the ZH2 costs 17 grand and the MT10 can be had for 13. So is 40 horsepower really worth an extra 4 grand? Well, that's up to you. One bike I'd like to compare to the ZH2 that we probably won't get a chance to make a video on just yet is the new Triumph Speed Triple. The Speed Triple packs an 1160cc triple cylinder engine putting down 177 horsepower and 92 foot-pounds of torque. It's considerably lighter than the ZH2 at 436 pounds, but when the ZH2 weighs in at 527 pounds, not much is heavier than that. Considering that the Speed Triple is now $18,300, it's good enough to warrant skipping the supercharged hooligan bike. Well, that's entirely a matter of taste if you're thinking about it. If you're all about power, then you'll say a ZH2 is the only hyper naked to get, and if you want something a little bit more refined, less garish looking, and less Monster Kyle energy, then you're probably on Team Triumph. Honestly, I'm not sure which one I'd pick. I love how much fun the ZH2 is, but you know your old Papa Yam loves himself a triple. We'll have to see how they stack up in the real world. So, you've decided that you're a ZH2 boy and you've run out and bought one and you managed not to loop it leaving the dealership. That's nice. Good for you. Now, what sort of problems are you likely to encounter with your bike? It's probably just ready to explode, right? Well, actually, no. Thanks to that low compression ratio, this thing's kind of a tank. The only time people have really reported issues when they start tinkering at the supercharger gears, and if you're at the point where you're trying to find more power by messing with the supercharger, you really need to take a second and re-examine your life. The thing about modern Japanese superbikes is that they just sort of work. As long as you do the regular maintenance, you're going to be just fine. So enjoy your new life as a supercharged squid. You might actually have a bike that you can pop a wheelie on now. Fact, the first use of Google as a verb in pop culture was on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Goodbye.
Hey there, partner, you done made it to the end of this here Yammie Noob video, but I tell you what, there's another Yammie Noob video right over here waiting for you. Now, I know I'm real gracious like that, and I just do nice things for you, so why don't you take a look at this video, and you let me know what you think.